Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You are welcome to the government class of the e-learning platform organized by CTY Model College, Ibadan. My name is Idowu Olatunji Abdulmalik. Before we commence today's class, these are the topics scheduled for this term. Our topic for today is nationalism. Under this topic, we shall define nationalism, we shall define proto-nationalism, we shall discuss the features of proto-nationalism, we shall discuss the external factors that led to the rise and growth of nationalism in Nigeria. We shall discuss the internal factors that led to the rise and growth of nationalism in Nigeria. We shall discuss the nationalist movement in West Africa. Nationalism. Nationalism may be defined as the strong desire or eagerness to work for the emancipation of one's country from political and economic control of another country, so that the economic and political destiny of the country will be in the hands of the indigenous citizens. Proto-nationalism. Proto-nationalism may be defined as the struggle of the nationalist movement aimed at reforms and participation of the natives in the colonial administration, rather for immediate self-government. Features of proto-nationalism. 1. Demands of the nationalists were aimed at reforms and participation in the colonial administration. 2. Movements formed under proto-nationalism were elitists. 3. Proto-nationalism organizers employed constitutional and non-violence means in seeking redress. 4. The leaders were conservative. Their activities were restricted to the urban centers. 5. Most of the leaders were either publishers or editors of newspapers, and these newspapers were used to pursue their nationalist objectives. Factors that led to the rise and growth of nationalism in Nigeria. External factors. 1. Atlantic Charter. The Atlantic Charter refers to a statement of principles made by President Franklin Roosevelt of the United States of America and Prime Minister Winston Churchill of the Britain. The two leaders promised to respect the right of all people to choose the form of government under which they will live. They also expressed the wish to see that all who are conquered and occupied should eventually have their independence restored to them. 2. Impact of the Second World War. The Second World War refers to European War, which took place between 1939 to 1945. It also involved troops from Africa. African soldiers learned a great deal from fighting alongside white soldiers. They acquired a new awareness of their position in the world. They discovered that the Europeans were no means superior or a master race born to rule. 3. Effect of the independence of India. 2 years after the Second World War, the independence of India in 1947 was the most important event which influenced the future of Africa. The sudden liberation of India established no reason to believe that independence will not come to Africa too. This gave the African nationalists a new hope and added an incentive to their struggle as the goal now appeared achievable. 4. The defeat of Britain by Japan. This diminished prestige and respect accorded to Britain in the whole world, and this motivated the nationalists to believe that Britain could be defeated in Africa if confronted, as Japan has done successfully. 5. British Labour Party. The activities of the British Labour Party played significant role in the rise and growth of nationalist struggle in West Africa. The party never hesitated to condemn colonialism and imperialism in British colonies and demanded for self-government in these colonies. 6. Influence of intellectual write-ups. The intellectual write-up or materials of scholars and political thinkers from both America and the Far East in condemning colonialism encouraged nationalism drive in Nigeria and other colonies in West Africa. Factors that led to the rise and growth of nationalism in Nigeria. Internal factors. 1. Appointment and deposition of African chiefs. Guided by economic and political interests, the British colonial masters wanted to penetrate into the hinterland of Africa. Thus, they deposed and appointed at will many traditional rulers who opposed their incursions. Examples of some of these traditional rulers were King Jaja of Okpobo, Oba Ovoram of Benin, Oba Kosoko of Lagos, etc. This indiscriminate appointment and removal of traditional rulers, which were seen as insultive to the customs of the people, were seriously opposed by the nationalists. Racial discrimination in the civil service. The British citizens dominated the civil service in Nigeria and were also given highest posts, thereby denying educated Nigerians the opportunity of being gainfully employed. Again, these whites earned fat salaries than their black counterparts who were qualified as they were. This situation, of course, aroused anger of the Nigerian nationalists and some labor union leaders. 3. Inadequate participation and representation in politics. Nigerians were not given adequate room to participate in the government of their country. This was evident in the various pre-colonial constitutions where Nigerians were grossly inadequately represented both in the legislative and executive councils. 4. Impact of educated elites. Educated Nigerians who had studied in Europe and got enlightened, upon their return to Nigeria, awake the spirit of nationalism among Nigerians. They organized seminars and lectures where Nigerians were exposed to democratic principles and the need for self-rule. 5. Monopoly of economy. Nigerian economy was dominated by European companies, while Nigerians were not allowed to penetrate the business. This economic exploitation by the Europeans further engineered the spirit of nationalism in some educated Nigerians. The press. The establishment of indigenously owned print media gave nationalists the much needed drive. These indigenously owned newspaper houses bravely criticized the obnoxious policies of colonial government in the country. Some of these newspapers were the West African Pilot, Lagos Daily News, Lagos Weekly Record, etc. Nationalist movements in West Africa. West African Student Union. The West African Student Union was formed in 1925 by Chief Ladipo Sholanke of Nigeria. The interest of this union was based on commerce, education, politics, etc. Achievement of the West African Student Union. 1. It served as a channel for protest movement among West Africans and other sympathizers in Britain. 2. A journal known as WASU and other pamphlets were published and they had effect on West Africans abroad and at home. 3. Teaching on racial equality and self-determination for the people were more pronounced in this student movement. The teaching was carried home by ex-members. 4. It served as a training ground for political leadership for West African intellectuals. 5. In British West Africa, nationalist movements drew some of their active members from the Union, e.g. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. 6. The Union succeeded in bringing together West Africans in the United Kingdom. National Congress of British West Africa. The National Congress of British West Africa was formed in 1920 by Kesley Hayford of Gold Coast and Dr. Akinwande Savage of Nigeria. Aims and objectives of the National Congress of British West Africa. 1. It wanted an effective representation in government at all levels based on free election. 2. It demanded for administrative reform and also equal opportunities, irrespective of color. It also argued that the civil service should be Africanized. 3. It argued for the right of Africans to appoint and depose traditional rulers. 4. The Congress demanded for the establishment of universities as well as creating standards in the educational sector. 5. It demanded for the development of the press and its role in a developing nation, and that law inimical to press freedom be repealed. 6. It argued for the establishment of a legislative council in each of the West African territories that will accommodate Africans, and half of members should be elected. Activities of the National Congress of British West Africa. 1. It tried to unite the 4 British West African colonies of Nigeria, Gold Coast, Sierra Leone, and Gambia by holding meetings. 2. The Congress, under the leadership of Casely Hayford, mobilized educated Nigerians in the 4 British colonies. 3. The Congress identified the shortcomings, objectionable practices, and policies of colonial administration in British West African colonies. 4. The Congress introduced radical approach to the nationalist activities in the British West Africa, e.g. holding international meetings, petitioning the colonial government, and demand for elective principle. 5. The Congress enlightened the people of West Africa through its meetings and publications. Effects of the activities of the National Congress of British West Africa. 1. Introduction of elective principle in Nigeria in 1922, Sierra Leone in 1924, and Gold Coast in 1925. 2. Higher educational institutions were established in Nigeria, the Gold Coast, and Sierra Leone, e.g. Yaba College, Achimota College, and Forabe College. 3. Africans were elected into the Legislative Council. 4. The activities of the Congress unified the nationalists in British West Africa towards fighting a common cause. 5. The introduction of elective principle in some British West African countries was followed by the springing up of political parties, e.g. NNDP in Nigeria, NCSL in Sierra Leone. 6. The awareness created by the National Council of British West Africa led to the development of newspapers in the British West Africa, e.g. Daily News of 1925 in Nigeria and Morning Star of Gold Coast. This is where we shall draw the curtain for today's class. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.